Hello and welcome to the Theosophical Society National Capital Lodge in DC for our public meeting. And today we're going to have a talk by Sue Prescott. I'll introduce her after we, you'll mute yourselves if you're not already muted. We'll do the universal invocation by Annie Besant just to begin our meeting and set the tone. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom, O hidden light shining in every creature, O hidden love embracing all in oneness, may all who feel themselves as one with thee know they are therefore one with every other. So I'm going to introduce Sue Prescott, who is a really valuable member, luckily, with lots of wonderful information, is always helping us out. Sue Prescott, MSW, is a therapist in private practice. This is old. Used to be in Seattle. You need to get the updated one. Now living in Crotona. Is that correct, Sue? You're making me envious. She's worked for over 40 years with children, couples, families, and individuals. And since she was a young adult, she's been a member of the Theosophical Society and is a national speaker. She's the author of Realizing the Self Within, which is an overview of the concepts of spirituality that can be applied to relationships and self-improvement. And I suspect there's more to add to this, and I'll let you, in addition, introduce yourself with anything else and talk about what you're going to be sharing. So I'll go ahead and mute myself and hand it over to you.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
So here we can, I'll share my screen. And hopefully this will work as we practiced. Yes. So then there. So now is that set up how you would like it? Yes. Perfect. Okay. So, well, you probably welcome to everybody to the dark night of the soul. And you probably have all heard of the phrase, the dark night of the soul, and it's used currently, and it may be referring to a difficult or painful time in our lives, maybe after the loss of a loved one or the breakup of a relationship, or signs of it might be depression or feeling lost or stuck, or maybe in our day-to-day lives, we feel like we should be happy, but we're not, and we can't figure out what's wrong, or we may even feel a lack of meaning in our lives. So the dark night of the soul speaks to this. It's an 8-stanza poem and commentary written about it by the 16th century Spanish Christian monk, St. John of the Cross. He wrote it when he was imprisoned by his fellow monks who opposed his ideas for reform. Firstly, I'd like to describe how St. John's family and background contributed to the person he became. So St. John's father was of a wealthy class, but he was disowned when he married the woman he loved, who was considered beneath his station. This is because his wife, Catalina Alvarez, was a silk weaver, and they married, and St. John's father took up her occupation. St. John was born in 1542 in a town called Fonteveros in Spain, and you can see the arrow pointing to the place where it would be, and it's next to, on the right, Avila, and that's where St. Teresa of Avila is from, and then on the left of the arrow is Salamanca, another town where he lived. When St. John was 7, unfortunately, his father died along with his older brother. And this threw St. John and his mother into poverty, but they managed despite this. St. John went to school, and when he was older, he worked as an attendant in a smallpox hospital, where the director saw St. John's ability and was impressed by his compassion and caring for others. He offered to pay for St. John's religious education, so St. John studied with the Jesuits and entered the Carmelite order of friars when he was 21. Now, the white cape signifies purity, and it's not necessarily symbolizing a higher order of monk, and it's sometimes used and sometimes not, just a comment about that. So St. John finished his education at the University of Salamanca, Spain, where he began teaching while still a student. At that time, he was ordained a priest at the age of 25. Soon after this, he met Saint Teresa of Avila, a great mystic who was 27 years older than him. And they had similar views about the practices of the church and wanted it to return to its roots in poverty. They felt that there should be an emphasis on prayer, silence, study, and contemplation, instead of offering services that brought in money. Now, this was through the use of indulgences. This is where a person could pay for forgiveness of sins, relief from illness or other suffering, and particularly early release from the time spent in purgatory after death. Now, purgatory in the Catholic Church is the transition after death where sinners are purged of their sins or wrongdoings before they can enter heaven. It may be taught as a form of hell with torment, but from fire. And it was used by the church as a way to keep people from committing a sin or making a poor moral choice. So you can see this depicted in the 17th century Peruvian painting, where at the bottom, there's humans with flames up to their waists. So in theosophical language, purgatory is a time after death when our consciousness is on the astral plane, where we are able to review our past behavior in the life we just lived. We have to face ourselves and the regrets that we have for our negative behavior, and it can be really painful to realize. So in St. John's day, there was a lot of fear about it, and indulgences could be purchased by a family member to lessen the deceased loved one's time in purgatory, or even avoid it entirely. So just a note, it was only 49 years earlier that Martin Luther in Germany called for church reform for similar practices when he posted his 95 theses or objections on the door of the church. And this was the start of the Protestant church in Christianity. Another example in the monastery that St. John and St. Teresa agreed should be abolished was receiving money from a wealthy patron to allow his son or daughter to have a larger room than others, or be relieved of chores, or another example, to be in the front row of a choir, or even have a servant. Now, not all monasteries participated in this, but there was a wide range of practices then. So St. John and St. Teresa formed a branch of nuns and monks of the Carmelite order who would go without shoes as a way to show their devotion to Jesus Christ and his poverty. They became known as discalced or shoeless. And so you can see this group have no shoes on. And this was when St. John was 26 And the monastery operated that way for 7 years. But as you can imagine, this was not liked by the officials of the church. And they saw St. John as rebellious, so they outlawed the practice of going shoeless and ordered him to return to the monastery where he first became a priest. And that's the Medina, that's this one, the Medina del Campo Cathedral. And when he didn't comply, they seized him and took him to Toledo as their prisoner. And he was 35 years old and remained there just under a year, about 9 months before he escaped. And as a captive, he was in a small room, 6 by 9 feet, with harsh conditions. It was windowless and cold in the winter, hot in the summer. He was fed only bread and water with some salted fish, and he was often whipped severely for his refusal to recant or confess he was wrong. And so he escaped by tying some sheets together and scaling the walls of the monastery. Then he found refuge with Saint Teresa and the nuns. Much later, when he was free, St. John showed his compassion when he never spoke harshly about his captors, saying they did it because they did not understand. Such compassion there. So St. John returned to a life of solitary contemplation and died 9 years later at the age of 49. 135 years later, in 1726, St. John was declared a saint. He was canonized then. And then 200 years after that, in 1926, he was named a doctor of the church. And there's only 35 saints in this category, and it's where one's life was so pure and sacred, and their writings both true and timeless, to be of benefit to the church and all people. And Saint Teresa of Avila was the first of the 4 women who were also named doctors of the church. And they're Saint Teresa of Avila, Saint Catherine of Siena, Saint Therese of Lisieux, and Saint Hildegard of Bingen. So before we read and discuss St. John's poem, I'll share with you what he said in his commentary about the problems that monks can have that bring about a dark night of the soul. He said the first problem beginners can have is secret pride from doing spiritual practices such as prayers, fasts, and contemplation. He said, seeking esteem and praise, they may become vain and speak of this in the presence of others, essentially bragging about it. And he said, the devil often increases this fervor. They condemn others for the same thing and slander them. They behold the mote in their brother's eye and don't consider the beam in their own. They strain their drinking water to not swallow a gnat, but swallow a camel. So these 2 quotes are from Matthew in the New Testament of the Holy Bible, and they're words from Jesus. St. John's second capital sin is spiritual avarice. And this may be having a collection of unusual rosaries or reading too many books rather than praying or contemplating. He says such desires need to be killed. I knew a man who for 10 years used a cross roughly formed from a branch. Another used as rosary beads the small bones from a spine of a fish. So another sin is spiritual gluttony. And this is where a person may confess too frequently or make their confessions carelessly, or go to extreme by harming themselves to show their devotion to God by mortifications of the flesh. And that's where a person seeks to mortify or put to death their sinful nature through extreme fasting, long periods of kneeling, or wearing a sackcloth of flax or hemp, and that would be extremely itchy and scratchy, or a hair shirt made with hair, so you felt kind of like a sense of needles always bugging you, or flagellation. And you can see the whips that people may use to whip their backs, or even the imitation of Jesus's death by crucifixion. They believe that withstanding pain showed God how strong their love was for him. So just a comment, you can see the duality of God being separate from a human being. And that was the belief at the time, that God was the separate power. But St. John and St. Teresa wrote about accessing God from within. So these mortifications were also written about in a book called The Cloud of Unknowing, written in the 14th century by an anonymous mystic, a Christian mystic, and anonymous also that he or she wouldn't be persecuted by the church. And the cloud said, if you put out your eyes, cut out your tongue, stop up your nose and ears, or even slice off your private parts, none of this would help you. So both St. John and the unknown author of The Cloud say that these only make the mind stronger because of the pain and irritation they are constantly causing. Other examples of what misguided people would do are written about in The Cloud. And it writes, the devil is not really far off. Some have their eyes fixed as if they were staggering sheep knocked on the head and soon about to die. Some walk bent over to show their humility, or they may contort their bodies to be always looking toward heaven, or they may walk with their mouths open constantly as if to drink in the bounties from above. St. John would say that these folks are in a dark night and their souls need to be cleansed by God's love. He writes that the dark night indicates they're lost and not directing their devotion to God in the proper way. And they need to develop a deeper love for God, which will mute this preoccupation with themselves. At first, in the dark night, there are just yearnings of love. Then the soul becomes enkindled with the fire of love and is raised up step by step into God. Now, St. John will share more about this that we can learn from, how to go deeper and deeper into prayer. The dark night of the soul has been written about by several spiritual teachers, including the current day mystic Carolyn Myss, the American author of The Spiritual Madness. And she was also a medical intuitive. And she writes of the experience of chaos and being out of touch with God and the purpose of why we are here. She says the chaos is a necessary breakdown of our old ways of thinking and going about our lives so that we can change. She says to tell yourself to just hold on and let it pass through so the transformation can take place inside you. She writes, The dark night of the soul is a journey into light, a journey from your darkness into the strength of hidden resources in your soul. She says that the madness will end, and all the time you are developing qualities of endurance, patience, and strength. Then Ram Dass, the American spiritual teacher and author of Be Here Now, long ago, 1971, said, the dark night of the soul is when you've lost the flavor of life, but have not yet gained the fullness of divinity. So we must weather the dark time, the period of transformation, when what is familiar has been taken away and the new richness is not yet yours. So Joseph Campbell, the late American writer and professor, agrees and said the dark night of the soul comes just before revelation, when everything is lost and all seems darkness. Then comes the new life and all that is needed. This is also written about, but not specifically labeled, the dark night of the soul by Saint Teresa of Avila, Saint John's mentor and close friend. And she wrote The Interior Castle, and that's from a vision she had in her prayer of a castle representing a person's soul. It was made of diamond or other beautiful crystal with a moat around it. And the castle had 7 rows of dwellings moving higher toward the center where the king or God lives. The outer dwellings represent our everyday life on the physical plane, where we have problems such as depression and confusion and this hopelessness that we can feel. She writes, reptiles might slip into the castle so we can't see its beauty. And we all can relate to that, I'm sure. These 7 dwellings are similar to the theosophical levels of consciousness of a human being. The center is the spiritual higher self, the divine within, or God, or the Atman, along with the higher mind. And this is a non-dual divine because it's within all of us. Next, there's the everyday mind, then the emotions and the physical body. And these would be the physical bodies on the exterior of the castle. St. John says it's easy to get distracted from the inner castle or the higher self because of the affairs of the world. With all the venomous creatures around, you cannot avoid being bitten. She says we need not abandon our home responsibilities, but that we should do our jobs well. The beloved looks less at the grandeur of our deeds than at the love with which we perform them. She emphasized love as St. John did, love in prayer as well as in helping others. So here is how St. John and the others teach us about going deeper into prayer or meditation in the dark night. He says our concentration and focus needs to deepen to reach the higher plane of the divine. And he says that greater than love in the dark night is divine love with God. They are as different as the body is from the soul. So this is the yearning for love in our everyday mind versus reaching this deeper place, the higher self, in prayer or in meditation. He writes that the dark night has the foretaste of God that kindles spiritual love. The soul feels itself wounded because however greatly it labors, it cannot purify itself enough for the divine love unless God takes it by the hand and purges it in the dark fire. So this has often been called grace. So St. John teaches us then that we move through the dark night and enter the second night, the dark night of spirit. This is where our transformation takes place. All those who enter the dark night and its trials will be healed by the Lord in the second night. So St. John describes how this can be done. He says, surrender yourself to God. Be as a lump of dirt that melts entirely into water. This leads to the union in the dark night of spirit. So this is also written about by the cloud of unknowing, which puts it this way. Put your thoughts and memories under a cloud of forgetting. So this is where in meditation or prayer, we work to stop our thoughts through concentration. Then the cloud says, go deeply into the cloud of unknowing to reach an emptiness or void, an absolute absence of knowing. Then with the Christian overtones, it says to beat continually upon this cloud of unknowing that is between you and your God with the sharp dart of longing love. And it says, don't give up, whatever happens. So this sharp dart is the focus we use in prayer or meditation to pierce through the cloud to reach God, as the monks would say, or enter into a deeper state of meditation. So the goal is not only to be in the cloud of unknowing, but to experience the divine through it. So this is also described in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, the Indian sage and mystic in the second century before current era. He described, and I won't go into it thoroughly, but the limbs of yoga, the 6th and 7th to the 8th limbs are dharana, that's concentration and centering the mind, and then dhyana, deeper, that's contemplation, and that's where we're touching God or the divine, as St. John says, like being a lump of mud that surrenders to God. And then samadhi is the total absorption in the self. And this is describing this deeper and deeper love for God that St. John describes, and how the focus is maintained. St. John writes that love unites the soul with God, and the more love the soul has, the more powerfully it enters into God and is centered on God. So you can hear the emphasis on love, and that's a way that we can sense this. Love is like fire, which ever rises upward with the desire to be absorbed in the center of its sphere, divine union with the love of God. So fire is another way to focus the mind and raise to the level of the divine. Carolyn Myss says it this way: navigating the dark night requires contemplation and quiet. When you are in this interior place, you stand at the crossroads of your power, between your ego and your soul, between time and timelessness. St. John goes on to say, denuded of its former skin, God clothes the soul anew. So this is the transformation that occurs within us. The result of this endeavor is poetically described in St. John's poem, The Dark Night of the Soul. We'll read this now, and just to note, the poem uses a metaphor of a house to refer to the physical body with our senses quiet from prayer. And then just another heads up, near the end of the poem, it speaks as if the writer is a female. So I'm going to read the poem in its entirety, and then we'll discuss it stanza by stanza. And it's also in the chat, and I wrote it at the very beginning, so you can follow along that way. In the darkness of night, kindled with love and yearning, oh, happy chance, I went forth unseen, my house being now at rest. Secure in darkness, down secret steps, disguised, oh, happy chance, I went forth hidden, not my house being now at rest. Oh, happy night, in secret when none saw me, nor I beheld aught, without light or guide, save that which burned in my heart and lit me from inside. The light that guided me, more surely than the noonday sun, led me to the one whom only I could see, deep in a place where only we could be. O guiding dark night, dark of night, more lovely than the dawn. O night that joined the lover with the beloved, transformed, the lover into the beloved drawn. Upon my flowery breast, which I kept for him and him alone, he slept as I caressed and loved him for my own, breathing an air of cedars in the breeze. Air down the castle wall wafted like fingers through his hair, caught in my throat, so all my senses were suspended there. Then the last stanza, lost in oblivion, I remained, my face reclined on my beloved's breast. All ceased as I abandoned myself, my cares forgotten among the lilies of the day. So now I'd like to open this up to a discussion with everyone. And I'll read this first stanza, and then there's some wonderful insights in here. And I want you to be sure and see what you think, what the meaning is. And if you don't hit it all, because I've been studying this a while, I'll ask some questions which may give you some idea of what it's getting at. So in the darkness of night, kindled with love and yearning, oh, happy chance, I went forth unseen, my house being now at rest. So comments that people might have, like what is the darkness here, and the chance, that, oh, happy chance. What might you want to share?
I'll speak up.
Sure.
Really good at that. So when I see that, and after talking about the dark night of the soul and the whole idea about what you've covered, and even using this to refer back to the cloud of unknowing, the concept of, to me, this is what comes to my mind, the concept that the darkness might be that emptiness, might be that finding that place of not thinking, knowing, just being absolutely in the now. And in that space, there is that happy chance that you can move beyond whatever your dark night of the soul is and explore and find that connection.
Wonderful. Others, do any others have a thought about these?
Jerome's hand is up.
Oh, good. Thank you because I can't see everybody easily.
Yeah, Sue, thank you very much for doing this presentation. I didn't know much about him. So this is a great webinar you're doing. I can't thank you enough. I did want to ask you, to answer your question, those dark nights, I believe is what he's referring as the purgation of the soul, or the divine union is this union of the soul and God, which he was trying to infer is where our security lies. And actually that this union, as I read it, actually occurs in this life and in this flesh. You don't have to die in order to unite with God. And I thought that was great. It reminded me a lot of the cherubic wanderer, that poetry, those 2-line poetries that were published about the same kind of passion, if you will, about the divine union. It also reminded me of the ascent, the Jewish ascent poetry, if you've ever read any of that. That's really tries to bring the person, the rabbi or whoever, up into God's level, where he can then converse for a time, and then it comes back down again into the flesh. He doesn't get to stay there forever. But I did want to ask you two that I picked up on that you didn't mention, was that third and fourth nights, the activity of the soul and the passivity of the soul. What's your thoughts with those two?
So can you explain what you mean again? What are you talking about, or the points?
Yeah, the one was you're answering your question. The dark night to me was the purgation of our soul.
Okay.
Okay, but my questions was the third and fourth nights. You didn't really hit those in the presentation.
Okay, well, there's only two. The first, the dark night of the soul, and then the second night, the dark night of spirit. That's where we're entering this deeper meditation or contemplation, where in St. John's language, God's grace, or he didn't write about grace too much, but well, the translations I read actually, but this is where there's the transformation within us in this dark night of spirit, because this dark, as Desiree so well stated, this is within us, and this is the cloud of unknowing that we're going to go through, this nothingness. There's no visible stuff in our eyes, you know, like if you shut your eyes, you can see light in the room, or even movement maybe of people if they cover the light. This is deeper than anything that is seen with the eyeballs or the brain. So that's what St. John is talking about, this dark night of spirit.
I'll send you the link to the version from Amazon I downloaded.
Great.
The book that really talks about these third and fourth nights. So if you ever want to get back with me on those, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Alex has
yes.
when you're ready, Alex has her hand up, but if you had something to say first, go ahead.
Oh, no, you guys go ahead. I just can't see you all.
Alex? You're muted in case you are speaking. I can't hear you.
Got it.
There she is.
Yes, since this is from a Christian perspective, St. John, compared to theosophy, theosophical terms, when he says soul, does he mean the causal body? When he says spirit, does he mean Atma? Because it seems to me that the dark night is the personality obscured in the soul, which the soul is the creator, from my understanding, the soul is the creator of the personality. The soul is the God for the personality. So what is he talking about compared to theosophical terms?
Sure, sure. So I think you're right on. The spirit would probably be God or the Atman, or even Atma Buddhi, the monad, the spiritual monad of a human being. The soul, often soul is, so there's so many ways that soul can be referred to as, but I think the soul, as St. John is talking about, is also the higher self and not the everyday mind and the emotions with that. And so the causal body, so that's a term in theosophy, but it's also can be the higher self or the spiritual self. And so, yeah, you've totally got it, Alex.
Just a thought, Sue, that the soul he's referring to is the animal soul. And it's the animal soul that goes through the dark night to become the human soul.
Yes, but then other places in the commentary is the soul is like everything. It's got this animal soul, but it's also has the potential to be cleansed by God. And then the soul is used when he was writing, like to be union with God. So soul is this large definition as he writes, as far as I can see. But in theosophy, so we speak about the soul being kind of this intermediate part. So Blavatsky wrote spirit, soul, and then the physical. So the physical is the body, and then the soul in Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine is the everyday mind and the emotions. And then the spiritual monad is Atma Buddhi and Buddhi Manas. So you have to get the gist of what the soul is, how it's being referred to by the sentence that it's in.
Linda, you have your hand up, but I wanted to make a comment on this, if that's okay. That to me, I feel like it's, the reference to this idea of the dark night of the soul would be, it's the lower self that experiences the dark night, but through transcending that and finding that empty space can move into the higher self. And so it's all, connected, but it's like that, got to push out of there and get through it. Thank you. Linda, please go ahead.
Yeah, what I wanted to say is, to me, this is already part of a process, because the last line says, my house being now at rest. So it's almost like it's a spiral where we go through dark nights and then we come to a higher realization. To me, this is happening in meditation, because being at rest to me means going within and kind of in meditation. So to me, this, we can have many dark nights of the soul that keep going higher to a different experience that's deeper and deeper.
Excellent. Because of time, we'll go to the second stanza, but you all are just very astute and you're getting this for sure. And so that I just want to point out that yearning in the second line there, that's that yearning that St. John referred to as well. And taking the opportunity, oh, happy chance. I just love the way he writes that. So here's the second verse or stanza. Secure in darkness, down secret steps, disguised, oh, happy chance. I went forth hidden, now my house being now at rest. So thoughts on that, like the secret steps, what that might mean, or other thoughts?
I don't know these things, but I know we've all had dark, deep moments. And I liked what was just said by Linda, that the writer seems to have distanced himself and is now speaking from a distance of a process that has occurred in our reflective stages. And when we go deep down in the secret steps, I think the person is caught up in the whirlwind of the moment. And usually when we are in our greatest torment, we are alone. When we pray perhaps our deepest prayer to God, we speak in our most quiet self to that unhidden being. So it's upon reflection, I think, that we think that these moments are great and gratuitous and a wonderful, marvelousness experience, most marvelous experience. So I see this as a twofold thing, Sue, that we are in it and we know nothing about it at the same time. I imagine, and just briefly, I'm thinking about real world events, people who went into the Holocaust funerals, the people of now losing their houses in the mudslides. It doesn't seem like a happy moment, but when you step aside maybe a year from now and says, oh, well, I got this big house later afterwards. It's perplexing.
Excellent. So,
Alex has her hand up again, but go ahead. Yeah, I'm just letting you know when someone has their hand
oh,
up.
thank you. Yes, so no, that's fine for Alex to go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So going down deep reminds me of something I learned many years ago. In psychology and in self-regression, when you sometimes call it self-hypnosis, I don't know. It's also called biofeedback, where you go into deeper levels of brain waves. I think they call it from alpha, you go to beta and delta. And the body slows down, thoughts disappear, and your breathing slows down, and you become, I guess it's the first stage of meditation. What he says, his house is at rest. They even tell you to imagine going deep within, down into a garden or into a cave or into something deep within. And in initiation, in many rituals, they talk about going into a cave, something deep, something quiet, away from the normal thought process. To me, that just reminded me of this concept of going down.
Excellent. Excellent. No, you all are really good at this. I'm going to go to the third just to keep moving through the stanzas, and then comments can still be made even if it's about the earlier stanzas. So the third one, oh, happy night, in secret when none saw me, nor I beheld aught, without light or guide, save that which burned in my heart and lit me from inside. I just think it's just beautiful. So, thoughts on that? So you can see the none saw me. And so there is a hand, Lonnie.
Yeah, there you go.
I did see that.
Hello, everyone. How you doing? Well, some of you may know that my husband, Jim, passed away January 5th, a year ago. And when he died, I was told that his ancestors came for him and his mom. I saw him shake his mom's hand and salute Scott's dad, and his first lover was there, and that there would be a judgment of everything, of what he did right and what he did wrong, and what I did right and what I did wrong, and it all just came down and happened. Yeah, it's been a year of chaos for me. I think I've made it through. I finally got estate settled and I retitled the car yesterday, which was ironically Friday the 13th. Yeah, I've been kind of a prisoner in my own house and prisoner in my own mind, but it's taught me to break free. It's helped me to let go of my old thinking. I've learned self-reliance, self-discipline, self-belief, and most importantly, self-respect. I think that's what I've had a problem with, but it's also realigned my thinking, my beliefs, and it's let me go of the old thinking and that I don't have to depend on others and that I need to be self-reliant. One of the things, I'm a witch, so one of the things that helped me was the witch's pyramid: to know, to will, to dare, to keep silent. And the most important thing of that to me was to know when to keep silent. Because I guess I just didn't know. I'm an Aries. I guess I just don't know when to shut up. But yeah, I know I've been codependent and wanting a family for, you know, a long time, and that's just been a mistake, and people have used me for that weakness. And now I know that I will be reunited with my mom, who's actually watching over me, and my dad and everyone else of my first clan. So yeah, I've been through quite a lot and everything. Thank you, Sue. This hit it right on the spot. And from a Christian perspective, it's really, really eye-opening. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for this presentation. And it's just a confirmation of I guess I'm doing right. I still have someone to take care of out of my life, but I think I can handle it now. So I just
Yes.
wanted to say that. Thank you. Thank you, Sue. Thank
Oh,
you.
you're sure welcome. I'm
Love
glad
you
for
guys.
your,
Thanks.
yeah, well, I'm glad for your transformation within, you know, that this poem is really speaking to. So I see a hand, JD, so
yes.
that is showing up.
Yeah, this particular verse reminds me very much of what you talked about earlier about when he was incarcerated in the prison, and he was in a windowless cell. Therefore, he wasn't being beheld by anybody. Nobody would see him. He didn't get any light, and probably in the dark a lot. The only thing that really lit him was his inner strength, his spirit, his passion for his yearning for union with God. And it speaks to me loads or volumes of that feeling that you endure while you're separate from God. And this is one of the things that I think he's really trying to say with this Dark Night, is to unite with God is the actual reason that he gives us for being. Over.
Mhm. So just a couple comments. I don't see any other hands, but from me on this verse. So when none saw me in the second line, so this is an internal process. And the ladder, you know, the steps are secret. So, and then the wonderful part about the light from the heart, and this is that sacred fire, and just was so beautifully written by this translator. So following the heart. And so we will go to the fourth stanza. The light that guided me more surely than the noonday sun led me to the one whom only I could see deep in a place where only we could be. Again, that's just such a beautiful way that's written, where only we could be. So, comments on this? So, yes, was there?
There's Alex.
Okay.
I'm sorry to keep speaking, but
Oh, no, this is great.
it just seems that at this time, when this happens, there's only you and your soul. There is nothing else. and everything else is a reflection of you anyway. So, of your state of mind, your state of being, and so on. It just seems to me that when you get back to the source, first of all, there was only the source, and you get back to the only thing that there really is. And that's the soul, as far as the personality is concerned. That's what it seems to me.
Oh, yes, it's wonderful. And that's in the third line, led me to the one, the soul, the higher self, or whatever, following the light from the heart. So we'll move to the fifth stanza.
Rosie had her,
Was there oh, yes, Rosie. Great. I see that. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, just what JD said struck me because it made me realize, as you said in the presentation, St. John was thrown into this prison and he was cut off from everything else in the darkness alone. And as you said, this is an internal process. And I thought, even though none of us would wish for that sort of experience, at the same time, it was something of a blessing because it did give him this opportunity to go deep into this inner process. And also, you emphasized in the last stanza that idea of in a place where only we could be, that, even when he probably went to stay with Saint Teresa of Avila and her sisters after this experience, you're among maybe spiritual people, but you're being kind of distracted by the outside, that he really needed that prison experience to go this deep to have this type of experience. So I think I'm glad JD kind of pointed that out. That really came home for me too.
That's beautiful. That's a very good point, Rosie. So the fifth stanza, O guiding dark of night, more lovely than the dawn, O night that joined the lover with the beloved transformed, the lover into the beloved drawn. It's just so deep, so beautiful. So because of time, I'd just like to point out that here we have reference to the beloved. And so there are other books of the Bible, like the Song of Songs in the Christian Bible, but also Rumi and Hafiz speak about the beloved. And then also there's often in these references, the marriage of the bride and the bridegroom. So this is again symbolizing the union with the higher self through this deep meditation. And then also Plotinus wrote about it in this light, as well as the Christian mystic Origen. I'm not sure how to say his name. So my time is to about 10 o'clock. So what we'll do, let me read to the end and then see if there's comments that you want to make and hold it till the end, because I want to point out a few things. So the sixth stanza, upon my flowery breast, which I had kept for him and him alone, he slept as I caressed and loved him for my own, breathing an air from cedars in the breeze. So that last comment written about the cedars, a cedar bough might be used by a servant to fan the air. So there was a subtle smell of cedar coming. And so sometimes when people describe the scent of a flower, they feel like they're transported to another place for an instant. And so that's another reference. And then, so this is where the woman may be sleeping on his breast. So this is using the sexual union of being a metaphor for, and it really totally is in a way, for the union with the higher self. And so then we'll go to the seventh. Air down the castle wall, wafted like fingers through his hair, caught in my throat, so all my senses were suspended there. Now, I'll finish with the 8th, but I wanted to point out that this is quite something when he talks about caught in my throat. And other translations might say it a little bit differently. Some say gripped my throat. So there's probably something about the throat chakra happening, and maybe others will have comments about that. But so you can hear the reference to the beloved being a male. And so this is again that union. And then, so lastly, the 8th stanza, lost in oblivion, I remained, my face on my beloved's breast. All ceased as I abandoned myself, my cares forgotten among the lilies of the day. So just a few comments, this oblivion, that union with the spiritual self. But lilies have a significance in that they are white, beautiful smell, and they signify purity. And they also are the rebirth of the world with springtime, with them coming up and having, you know, the revival of our summer and having harvest. So there's bountifulness with that and survival also. But this lily is like the rebirth within us of our spiritual self, our second birth. So those are my comments. And so some hands are up, which is lovely. So Desiree, you can see them all. So you can just.
Adrienne had her hand up first, and then I do.
Okay.
The question I was raising is in the 8th, and it goes to the beloved bliss. And my question was, how do you suggest we maintain the honeymoon once we arise in the day?
Well, so I would suggest that I'm just going to stop the share so I can see y'all. So we're taught in Theosophy all the time to realize that we're all one. So one suggestion is to every time we see and reflect on people or plants or animals, that we realize the Atman is within all of us. And then if we can, when we're disagreeing with someone, let's say, that we realize I'm not any different than my sister, or my parent, that we're the same. And so keeping that in mind all the time is one way to do that. So I'll pass it on to Desiree if there's other thoughts.
Well, I was the next one with my hand up. So, especially as it gets toward the end, when you talked about the throat, what came to me was that breathlessness, that like,
yes.
And the just before, you start to breathe again, and just before coming, like almost like a baby being born, and coming back into, okay, I'm ready to come back into the real world, and I'm bringing all this with me. Also, I see a lot of parallel metaphor to even the sexual union, that story of lovemaking, and as it finishes off there. And I also wanted to share, just this morning, I saved those little curly cues from the Edgar Cayce Center, the ARE. I visit fairly often. They have these like little fortune cookie things of Edgar Cayce quotes that you can go in and pick up. And so I usually hang on to them, and I pick them up and look at them occasionally. And just today I picked up one that's, out of my little pile, that I say, anyone can find fault. It's the wise person who finds that which encourages another in the turmoils and strifes of the day. And I thought that was pretty fitting for today's talk. And thank you. And Susanna has her hand up.
Yes, first of all, I saw. Thank you so much for a wonderful talk. As always, enjoyed it tremendously. When you said, you just made this comment to remember that you know, if we have a dispute with somebody or don't agree that we are all the same. But I think what really stood out to me is his comment when he was imprisoned and tortured, and he said, you know, to forgive them because they didn't understand what they were doing. And I think this perspective is just such a helpful one, because that's what we should apply to everyone if something happens. So thank you.
You're welcome. So, well, actually, we're not too over time. So that was wonderful to talk with you all and have your participation with the discussion and all. So I'm really glad to talk with you, and it's just a beautifully, so it's just encouraging. I think this information from St. John of the Cross is so encouraging. So.
Thank you, Sue. It was a really, really wonderful presentation, and I think great reflection for everyone. So we appreciate you always being here with us, and thank you for your presentation. And so with that, I guess I will call it done, and we look forward to seeing you all next week, right? So, thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.